Okay. Alright. Can you hear me? Mic is pointed the wrong way. Of course it is. And as usual, not centered. I hate this setup. But I don't have other options. Let me see if I can. That's a little better, I guess. I don't know. If I move. That's better. Okay. Sorry for the delay. My hair is not cooperating with me today. It's still not cooperating, but we're just going to pretend like it is. Hello, fellow witches and wizards. My name is Phoenix Jenny, and welcome to the stream. Welcome to Storytime Saturday number 37. 37. Awesome. Okay. So glad that you're here. If you could do me a favor and click the like button, super helpful. Tells YouTube that you like the stream, and YouTube is more likely to share it with other people the more likes that a stream gets. That'd be super, super helpful. And feel free to talk in the chat section or in the comment section if you're watching this and it's no longer live. I respond to those. And become a subscriber if you're not subscribed already, if you enjoy my content, and turn on notifications so you'll be notified the next time I go live, the next time I upload. I did not go live yesterday because I was going to the theater. I didn't end up going, though, because there was a huge snowstorm here, so that was really annoying. But anyway. And no stream for next weekend because next weekend is going to be Thanksgiving. So, I won't be doing anything, hopefully, for YouTube next weekend. But we'll return with a Plague Tale and everything else the following week. And, if you want to know what my schedule is going to be, I post on YouTube, but I also post on Twitter. Link in the description. I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support me as a content creator. I am a writer, and I have essays and short stories and poetry and such on Patreon if you'd like to read those. And I have free stuff on there too. If you can't afford to be a patron, you can check out the free stuff that's there. And I also have an Instagram and a TikTok, so follow me there as well. Again, I apologize for the camera situation because my webcam isn't working. So I'm just using my phone and I'm just waiting to get a stand to put it on. Right now it's down here because that's the only place I can put it. And I apologize for the last stream. I kept looking up here because my webcam used to be there. I took it down so that I'd remember that it's not there anymore. I keep forgetting. I kept looking there instead of here because I keep thinking the camera's up here. So annoying. But I would really like to get one of those stands where I can put a tripod so I can put my phone up and so it's not, staring up at me at this really unflattering angle. But this is what I got. So, okay. Is that everything? That might be everything. We are reading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And we're almost halfway already. I feel like we just started. Isn't that crazy? Almost halfway of this book and almost halfway of the entire series. Crazy. We're going to be reading chapters 17 and 18 today. Chapter 17, The Four Champions, and Chapter 18, The Weighing of the Wands. But we'll do a quick recap of what the last 2 chapters were. Chapters 15 and 16. 15 was Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. Harry previously tried to prevent Sirius Black from coming to his rescue, so to speak, but that didn't work. Their schoolwork is becoming more demanding. They learned about the Imperious Curse in Defense Against the Dark Arts, and Harry is rather good at fighting it off. Harry and Ron received top marks in divination for making up a bunch of bad stuff that was going to happen to them. They're going to start learning summoning charms. And the Triwizard Tournament is going to begin, so the schools, Beauxbatons and Durmstrang, are coming. Hermione's still trying to push SPEW. And is this the chapter where she tries to... No, that's the next chapter. So they're waiting for the other schools to arrive, and Beauxbatons arrives on this gigantic house because their headmistress is a gigantic woman. And then Professor Karkaroff is the headmaster of Durmstrang. They come in a ship that rises out of the lake, and their star student is Victor Crumb, the famous Quidditch player that Ron is a big fan of. And then chapter 16, The Goblet of Fire. They have their feast. They meet Fleur Delacour. And Dumbledore explains the rules of the Goblet of Fire. There's going to be an age line to prevent underage students from entering. Karkaroff, Moody, and Harry had an odd exchange in the entrance hall. Fred and George made an aging potion so they could step over the line and put their names into the Goblet of Fire. But that didn't work out, and they ended up being pushed back, and they ended up growing beards. And then Harry, Ron, and Hermione go down to visit Hagrid, and Hermione tries to get Hagrid to join SPEW, but he refuses. They're talking about the Triwizard Tournament. Hagrid knows what's going to happen. Hagrid knows what's coming, and they don't, and they try to get him to tell them, but he won't. He ends up going up to the castle with Madame Maxime because he is quite attracted to her, apparently. And then they have the ceremony, they have the feast and the ceremony with the Goblet of Fire to see who the champions are going to be. So the Durmstrang champion is Victor Crumb, and then the Beauxbatons champion is Fleur Delacour, and then the Hogwarts champion is Cedric Diggory. And that is the end of that, and they have a pleasant Triwizard Tournament, and everybody's happy, and the book ends. No, that's not what happens. What happens is Harry's name, surprise, surprise, comes out of the Goblet of Fire, because literally everything happens to this kid. That's exactly where we left off, at that tense moment where his name has been said by Dumbledore, and there's just a silence in the room, and that's where we left off. So, we'll get started with that. Again, please feel free to talk in the chat as I'm reading, because I will be discussing what I'm reading with you. It's not just me reading, so please join if you want to. Don't be shy. I'm not intimidating at all, I hope. I mean, I can say that, but I don't know how you feel. But anyway, please feel free to talk and chat with me. I would be happy to do that with you. But let's begin. Chapter 17, The Four Champions. Harry sat there, aware that every head in the great hall had turned to look at him. He was stunned. He felt numb. He was surely dreaming. He had not heard correctly. There was no applause. A buzzing, as though of angry bees, was starting to fill the hall. Some students were standing up to get a better look at Harry as he sat, frozen in his seat. Up at the top table, Professor McGonagall had got to her feet and swept past Ludo Bagman and Professor Karkaroff to whisper urgently to Professor Dumbledore, who bent his ear toward her, frowning slightly. Harry turned to Ron and Hermione. Beyond them, he saw the long Gryffindor table all watching him, open-mouthed. I didn't put my name in, Harry said blankly. You know I didn't. Both of them stared just as blankly back. At the top table, Professor Dumbledore had straightened up, nodding to Professor McGonagall. Harry Potter! He is shouting. There's an exclamation point. He called again. Harry, up here, if you please. Come on, Hermione whispered, giving Harry a slight push. Harry, for goodness sake. She doesn't say that, but she says it in the movie. Harry got to his feet, trod on the hem of his robes, and stumbled slightly. He set off up the gap between the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff tables. It felt like an immensely long walk. The top table didn't seem to be getting any nearer at all, and he could feel hundreds and hundreds of eyes upon him, as though each were a searchlight. The buzzing grew louder and louder. After what seemed like an hour, he was right in front of Dumbledore, feeling the stares of all the teachers upon him. Well, through the door, Harry, said Dumbledore. He wasn't smiling. See, he's not exactly happy about it, okay? Harry moved off along the teacher's table. Hagrid was seated right at the end. He did not wink at Harry, or wave, or give any of his usual signs of greeting. He looked completely astonished and stared at Harry as he passed like everyone else. Harry went through the door out of the great hall and found himself in a smaller room, lined with paintings of witches and wizards. A handsome fire was roaring in the fireplace opposite him. The faces in the portraits turned to look at him as he entered. He saw a wizened witch flit out of the frame of her picture and into the one next to it, which contained a wizard with a walrus mustache. The wizened witch started whispering in his ear. Victor Crumb, Cedric Diggory, and Flora Delacour were grouped around the fire. They looked strangely impressive, silhouetted against the flames. Crumb, hunched up and brooding, was leaning against the mantelpiece, slightly apart from the other two. Cedric was standing with his hands behind his back, staring into the fire. Flora Delacour looked around when Harry walked in and threw back her sheet of long, silvery hair. Oh my gosh. I forgot to do something. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Mm-hmm. Oh. Well, that looks interesting. Oh, that looks fun. Sorry. I was distracted. YouTube is very distracting. Oh, yeah, I reached 50 subs. Yay! I still don't know what I want to do, though. I really haven't had time to think about it. So, we'll get there when we get there. That one. Yes. Hooray! Okay. Go away. Everybody go away. Okay. Cool. Alright. Sorry about that. I usually do that, what I just did during this, during the intermission, or the, beginning stuff, but I was busy getting ready, doing other things. Anyway. What is it? She said. Do they want us back in the hall? She thought he had come to deliver a message. Harry didn't know how to explain what had just happened. He just stood there, looking at the three champions. It struck him how very tall all of them were. There was a sound of scurrying feet behind him, and Ludo Bagman entered the room. He took Harry by the arm and led him forward. Extraordinary, he muttered, squeezing Harry's arm. Absolutely extraordinary. Gentlemen, lady, he added, approaching the fireside and addressing the other three, may I introduce, incredible though it may seem, the fourth Triwizard champion. Victor Crumb straightened up. His surly face darkened as he surveyed Harry. Cedric looked nonplussed. He looked from Bagman to Harry and back again, as though sure he must have misheard what Bagman had said. Fleur Delacour, however, tossed her hair, smiling, and said, Oh, very funny joke, Mr. Bagman. What does nonplussed mean? I used to know what it meant. Nonplussed. It means surprised or confused. So much that they don't know how to react. Nonplussed. Surprised. Confused. Joke, Bagman repeated, bewildered. No, not at all. Harry's name just came out of the Goblet of Fire. Crumb's thick eyebrows contracted slightly. Cedric was still looking politely bewildered. Fleur frowned. But evidently there has been a mistake, she said contemptuously to Bagman. He cannot compete. He is too young. Well, it is amazing, said Bagman, rubbing his smooth chin and smiling down at Harry. But, as you know, the age restriction was only imposed this year as an extra safety measure. And as his name came out of the goblet, I don't think there can be any ducking out at this stage. It's down in the rules. You're obliged. Harry will just have to do the best he... The door behind them opened again, and a large group of people came in. Professor Dumbledore, followed closely by Mr. Crouch, Professor Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, Professor McGonagall, and Professor Snape. Harry heard the buzzing of the hundreds of students on the other side of the wall before Professor McGonagall closed the door. Madame Maxime, said Fleur at once, striding over to her headmistress, they are saying that this little boy is to compete also. Somewhere under Harry's numb disbelief he felt a ripple of anger. Little boy. That makes me laugh. Madame Maxime had drawn herself up to her full and considerable height. The top of her handsome head brushed the candle-filled chandelier, and her gigantic black satin bosom swelled. What is the meaning of this, Dumbledore? She said imperiously. I'd rather like to know myself, Dumbledore, said Professor Karkaroff. He was wearing a steely smile, and his blue eyes were like chips of ice. 2 Hogwarts champions. I don't remember anyone telling me the host school is allowed 2 champions, or have I not read the rules carefully enough? He gave a short and nasty laugh. C'est impossible, said Madame Maxime, whose enormous hand, with its many superb opals, was resting upon Flora's shoulder. Hogwarts cannot have 2 champions. It is most unjust. We were under the impression that your age line would keep out younger contestants, Dumbledore, said Karkaroff, his steely smile still in place, though his eyes were colder than ever. Otherwise, we would, of course, have brought along a wider selection of candidates from our own schools. It's no one's fault but Potter's, Karkaroff, said Snape softly. His black eyes were alight with malice. Don't go blaming Dumbledore for Potter's determination to break rules. He has been crossing lines ever since he arrived here. Thank you, Severus, said Dumbledore firmly, and Snape went quiet, though his eyes still glinted malevolently through his curtain of greasy black hair. Professor Dumbledore was now looking down at Harry, who looked right back at him, trying to discern the expression of the eyes behind the half-moon spectacles. Did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire, Harry? He said, enthusiastically. No, that's not what it says. It says, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire, Harry? He asked calmly. So if you become a patron, you can read my Harry Potter essay. I wrote an essay analyzing all of the Harry Potter films, and it's on my Patreon. So if you become a patron for $4 a month, you can read that in its entirety. And in that essay, I explain why I actually prefer the way the movie did it, with Dumbledore being upset. I admit, when I first watched the movie, I was like, Dumbledore? No, Dumbledore would never act that way. And yes, you could make that argument, but I argue in my essay that Dumbledore, they wanted to express how Dumbledore was really feeling in the moment, which you can see in the book too. It's just a movie is going to express themes differently than a book is because, they're different. They tell stories differently. So in order to effectively express how the feelings that Dumbledore has, what Dumbledore is going through mentally, he needed to express it verbally, because in the book you can just read about it, but you can't in the movie. I explain it much better in the essay. But the book, you'll see that Harry will mention, Dumbledore looks a little older than usual. Dumbledore isn't acting quite right. Something seems off. And we don't get a full explanation, but we actually know what's going on. We know that Dumbledore is very concerned. Because usually Dumbledore has everything figured out. Usually Dumbledore knows, he has all the pieces on the board, and he knows generally what the actions each piece is going to take. But then all of a sudden, the Dark Mark, and Harry's scar hurting, and then Harry's name coming out of the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore has no clue what's happening, and he's very uncomfortable. Not just because, as you can imagine, somebody as clever as Dumbledore would be uncomfortable, suddenly put in a situation where he doesn't understand what's going on, and he's used to understanding what's going on. But he's worried. He's worried about the safety of Harry and worried about the things that are happening. He suspects that Voldemort is up to something. But he doesn't know exactly how it's coming together, and he's freaking out a little bit. So the book shows Dumbledore freaking out through his age, through looking old and tired and bedraggled. It's harder to do that in the movie, just because he already looks old. How can you make Dumbledore look older and it really come across as to how he's dealing with extra stress? It's not as effective in the movie as it is in the book, so they decided to show it through his dialogue, as is usually the choice with film, because dialogue is more important in film than it is in a novel. But I give examples, and I explain the reasoning much better in the essay, along with a plethora of other things. I explain a bunch of different controversies for every movie. And if you'd like to read those, it's on my Patreon right now. Link in the description. No, said Harry. He was very aware of everybody watching him closely. Snape made a soft noise of impatient disbelief in the shadows. Did you ask an older student to put it into the Goblet of Fire for you? Said Professor Dumbledore, ignoring Snape. No, said Harry vehemently. Ah, but of course he is lying, cried Madame Maxime. Snape was now shaking his head, his lip curling. He could not have crossed the age line, said Professor McGonagall sharply. I'm sure we all agreed on that. Dumbledore must have made a mistake with the line, said Madame Maxime, shrugging. It is possible, of course, said Dumbledore politely. Dumbledore, you know perfectly well you did not make a mistake, said Professor McGonagall angrily. Really, what nonsense! Harry could have crossed the line himself, and as Professor Dumbledore believes he did not persuade an older student to do it for him, I'm sure that should be good enough for everybody else. She shot a very angry look at Professor Snape. Mr. Crouch, Mr. Bagman, said Karkaroff, his voice... Oh, that word again. Uncourteous means oily. Once more. You are our objective judges. Surely you will agree that this is most irregular. Bagman wiped his round, boyish face with his handkerchief and looked at Mr. Crouch, who was standing outside the circle of the firelight, his face half hidden in shadow. He looked slightly eerie, the half-darkness making him look much older, giving him an almost skull-like appearance. When he spoke, however, it was in his usual curt voice. You must follow the rules, and the rules state clearly that those people whose names come out of the Goblet of Fire are bound to compete in the tournament. I can't remember. Is he under the Imperius Curse? Mr. Crouch? I don't remember. But something seems off about him. And I can't think if it's because he's under the Imperius Curse or if it's because he has an inkling of what's happening and doesn't know what to do about it. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure we'll know later. Well, Barty knows the rule-book back to front, said Bagman, beaming and turning back to Karkaroff and Madame Maxime, as though the matter was now closed. I insist upon resubmitting the names of the rest of my students, said Karkaroff. He had dropped his unctuous tone and a smile now. His face wore a very ugly look indeed. You will set up the Goblet of Fire once more, and we will continue adding names until each school has 2 champions. It's only fair, Dumbledore. But Karkaroff, it doesn't work like that, said Bagman. The Goblet of Fire's just gone out. It won't reignite until the start of the next tournament. Of course, how convenient. In which Durmstrang will most certainly not be competing, exploded Karkaroff. After all our meetings and negotiations and compromises, I little expected something of this nature to occur. I have half a mind to leave now. Empty threat, Karkaroff, growled a voice from near the door. You can't leave your champion now. He's got to compete. They've all got to compete. Binding magical contract, like Dumbledore said. Convenient, eh? Moody had just entered the room. He limped toward the fire, and with every right step he took, there was a loud clunk. Convenient, said Karkaroff. I'm afraid I don't understand you, Moody. Harry could tell he was trying to sound disdainful, as though what Moody was saying was barely worth his notice, but his hands gave him away. They had balled themselves into fists. Don't you? Said Moody quietly. It's very simple, Karkaroff. Someone put Potter's name in that goblet knowing he'd have to compete if it came out. Evidently someone who wished to give Hogwarts 2 bites of the apple, said Madame Maxime. I quite agree, Madame Maxime, said Karkaroff, bowing to her. I shall be lodging complaints with the Ministry of Magic and the International Confederation of Wizards. If anyone's got reason to complain, it's Potter, growled Moody. But, funny thing, I don't hear him saying a word. Why should he complain? Burst out Fleur Delacour, stamping her foot. He has the chance to compete, hasn't he? We have all been hoping to be chosen for weeks and weeks. The honour for our schools. 1,000 galleons in prize money. This is a chance many would die for. Maybe someone's hoping Potter is going to die for it, said Moody with the merest trace of a growl. An extremely tense silence followed these words. Bingo. That is the idea, more or less. Ludo Bagman, who was looking very anxious indeed, bounced nervously up and down on his feet and said, Moody, old man, what a thing to say. We all know Professor Moody considers the morning wasted if he hasn't discovered 6 plots to murder him before lunchtime, said Karkaroff loudly. Apparently he is now teaching his students to fear assassination too, an odd quality in a defense against the dark arts teacher, Dumbledore. But no doubt you had your reasons. Imagining things, am I? Growled Moody. Seeing things, eh? It was a skilled witch or wizard who put the boy's name in that goblet. What evidence is there of that? Said Madame Maxime, throwing up her huge hands. Because they hoodwinked a very powerful magical object, said Moody. It would have needed an exceptionally strong confundus charm to bamboozle that goblet into forgetting that only 3 schools compete in the tournament. I'm guessing they submitted Potter's name under a 4th school to make sure he was the only one in his category. You seem to have given this a great deal of thought, Moody, said Karkaroff coldly, and a very ingenious theory it is, though of course I heard you recently got it into your head that one of your birthday presents contained a cunningly disguised basilisk egg, and smashed it into pieces before realizing it was a carriage clock. So you'll understand if we don't take you entirely seriously. There are those who will turn innocent occasions to their advantage, Moody retorted in a menacing voice. It's my job to think the way dark wizards do, Karkaroff, as you ought to remember. Alistair, said Dumbledore warningly. Harry wondered for a moment whom he was speaking to, but then realized Mad-Eye could hardly be Moody's real first name. Moody fell silent, though still surveying Karkaroff with satisfaction. Karkaroff's face was burning. How the situation arose we did not know, said Dumbledore, speaking to everyone gathered in the room. It seems to me, however, that we have no choice but to accept it. Both Cedric and Harry have been chosen to compete in the tournament. This, therefore, they will do. But Dumbledore, my dear Madame Maxime, if you have an alternative, I would be delighted to hear it. Dumbledore waited, but Madame Maxime did not speak. She merely glared. She wasn't the only one either. Snape looked furious. Karkaroff livid. Bagman, however, looked rather excited. Well, shall we crack on, then? He said, rubbing his hands together and smiling around the room. Got to give our champions their instructions, haven't we? Barty, want to do the honors? Mr. Crouch seemed to come out of a deep reverie. See, he's not speaking up. He's acting very placid. Yes, he said. Instructions. Yes. The first task. He moved forward into the firelight. Close up, Harry thought he looked ill. Yeah, well, I mean, that's not to say that there isn't more going on with Mr. Crouch. There definitely is, but I just don't know exactly what it is at this current moment. There were dark shadows beneath his eyes and a thin papery look about his wrinkled skin that had not been there at the Quidditch World Cup. Whatever it is, it's important. The first task is designed to test your daring, he told Harry, Cedric, Fleur, and Victor. So we are not going to be telling you what it is. Courage in the face of the unknown is an important quality in a wizard. Very important. The first task will take place on November the 24th, in front of the other students and the panel of judges. The champions are not permitted to ask for or accept help of any kind from their teachers to complete the tasks in the tournament. The champions will face the first challenge armed only with their wands. They will receive information about the second task when the first is over. Owing to the demanding and time-consuming nature of the tournament, the champions are exempt from end-of-year tests. Oh, that's a good deal. Mr. Crouch turned to look at Dumbledore. I think that's all, is it, Albus? I think so, said Dumbledore, who was looking at Mr. Crouch with mild concern. Yeah, Dumbledore knows something's up to. Are you sure you wouldn't like to stay at Hogwarts tonight, Barty? No, Dumbledore, I must get back to the ministry, said Mr. Crouch. It is a very busy, very difficult time at the moment. I've left young Weatherby in charge. Very enthusiastic. A little over-enthusiastic, if truth be told. Percy is too exciting for Mr. Crouch. You'll come and have a drink before you go, at least, said Dumbledore. Come on, Barty, I'm staying, said Bagman brightly. It's all happening at Hogwarts now, you know. Much more exciting here than at the office. Where would they stay? Does Hogwarts have guest rooms? I think not, Ludo, said Crouch with a touch of his old impatience. Professor Cockcroft, Madame Maxime, a nightcap, said Dumbledore. But Madame Maxime had already put her arm around Flora's shoulders and was leading her swiftly out of the room. Yeah, I don't think they're in the mood. Harry could hear them both talking very fast in French as they went off into the great hall. Karkaroff beckoned to Crumb, and they too exited, though in silence. Harry, Cedric, I suggest you go up to bed, said Dumbledore, smiling at both of them. I am sure Gryffindor and Hufflepuff are waiting to celebrate with you. And it would be a shame to deprive them of this excellent excuse to make a great deal of mess and noise. Harry glanced at Cedric, who nodded, and they left together. The great hall was deserted now. The candles had burned low, giving the jagged smiles of the pumpkins an eerie, flickering quality. So, said Cedric with a slight smile, we're playing against each other again. I suppose, said Harry. He really couldn't think of anything to say. The inside of his head seemed to be in complete disarray, as though his brain had been ransacked. So, tell me, said Cedric as they reached the entrance hall, which was now lit only by torches in the absence of the Goblet of Fire. How did you get your name in? I didn't, said Harry, staring up at him. I didn't put it in. I was telling the truth. Ah, okay. This boils my blood. It boils my blood that people don't believe him. Harry could tell Cedric didn't believe him. Well, see you then. I think it's because people expect Harry to want to do this kind of thing. I don't know. Instead of going up the marble staircase, Cedric headed for a door to its right. Harry stood listening to him going down the stone steps beyond it. Then slowly he started to climb the marble ones. Was anyone except Ron and Hermione going to believe him? Well, Hermione. Or would they all think he'd put himself in for the tournament? Yet how could anyone think that, when he was facing competitors who had 3 years more magical education than he had, when he was now facing tasks that not only sounded very dangerous, but which were to be performed in front of hundreds of people? Yes, he'd thought about it. He'd fantasized about it. But it had been a joke, really, an idle sort of dream. He'd never really seriously considered entering. But someone else had considered it. Someone else had wanted him in the tournament, and had made sure he was entered. Why? To give him a treat? He didn't think so, somehow. To see him make a fool of himself? Well, they were likely to get their wish. But to get him killed? Was Moody just being his usual paranoid self? Couldn't someone have put Harry's name in the goblet as a trick, a practical joke? Did anyone really want him dead? Harry was able to answer that at once. Yes, someone wanted him dead. Someone had wanted him dead ever since he had been a year old. Lord Voldemort. But how could Voldemort have ensured that Harry's name got into the Goblet of Fire? Voldemort was supposed to be far away, in some distant country, in hiding, alone, feeble, and powerless. Yet in that dream he had had, just before he had awoken with his scar hurting, Voldemort had not been alone. He had been talking to Wormtail, plotting Harry's murder. Harry got a shock to find himself facing the fat lady already. He had barely noticed where his feet were carrying him. It was also a surprise to see that she was not alone in her frame. The wizened witch who had flitted into her neighbor's painting when he had joined the champions downstairs was now sitting smugly beside the fat lady. She must have dashed through every picture lining 7 staircases to reach here before him. Both she and the fat lady were looking down at him with the keenest interest. Well, 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 said the fat lady. Violet's just told me everything. Who's just been chosen as school champion, then? Balderdash, said Harry dully. It most certainly isn't, said the pale witch indignantly. No, no, Vi, it's the password, said the fat lady soothingly, and she swung forward on her hinges to let Harry into the common room. The blast of noise that met Harry's ears when the portrait opened almost knocked him backward. Next thing he knew, he was being wrenched inside the common room by about a dozen pairs of hands, and was facing the whole of Gryffindor House, all of whom were screaming, applauding, and whistling. You should have told us you'd entered, bellowed Fred. He looked half annoyed, half deeply impressed. How did you do without getting a bid? Brilliant, roared George. I didn't, Harry said. I don't know how. But Angelina had now swooped down upon him. Oh, if it couldn't be me, at least it's a Gryffindor. You'll be able to pay back Diggory for that last Quidditch match, Harry, shrieked Katie Bell, another of the Gryffindor chasers. We've got food, Harry. Come and have some. I'm not hungry. I had enough at the feast. Yeah, how can they have food? They just had food. But nobody wanted to hear that he wasn't hungry. Nobody wanted to hear that he hadn't put his name in the goblet. Not one single person seemed to have noticed that he wasn't at all in the mood to celebrate. Lee Jordan had unearthed the Gryffindor banner from somewhere, and he insisted on draping it around Harry like a cloak. Harry couldn't get away. Whenever he tried to sidle out over to the staircase up to the dormitories, the crowd around him closed ranks, forcing another butterbeer on him, stuffing crisps and peanuts into his hands. Everyone wanted to know how he had done it, how he had tricked Dumbledore's age line and managed to get his name into the goblet. No one's listening to him, as usual. I didn't, he said over and over again. I don't know how it happened. But for all the notice anyone take, he might just as well not have answered at all. I'm tired, he bellowed finally, after nearly half an hour. No, seriously, George. I'm going to bed. He wanted more than anything to find Ron and Hermione, to find a bit of sanity, but neither of them seemed to be in the common room. Insisting that he needed to sleep and almost flattening the little Creevy brothers as they attempted to waylay him at the foot of the stairs, Harry managed to shake everyone off and climb up to the dormitory as fast as he could. To his great relief, he found Ron was lying on his bed in the otherwise empty dormitory, still fully dressed. He looked up when Harry slammed the door behind him. Where have you been? Harry said. Oh, hello, said Ron. He was grinning, but it was very odd. Strange sort of grin. Harry suddenly became aware that he was still wearing the Scarlet Gryffindor banner that Lee had just tied around him. He hastened to take it off, but it was knotted very tightly. Ron lay on the bed without moving, watching Harry struggle to remove it. So, he said, when Harry had finally removed the banner and thrown it into a corner. Congratulations. What do you mean, congratulations? Said Harry, staring at Ron. There was definitely something wrong with the way Ron was smiling. It was more like a grimace. Well, no one else got across the age line, said Ron. Not even Fred and George. What did you use? The invisibility cloak? The invisibility cloak wouldn't have got me over that line, said Harry slowly. Oh, right, said Ron. I thought you might have told me if it was the cloak. Because it would have covered both of us, wouldn't it? But you found another way, did you? Listen, said Harry. I didn't put my name in that goblet. Someone else must have done it. Ron raised his eyebrows. What would they do that for? I don't know, said Harry. He felt it would sound very melodramatic to say, to kill me. Ron's eyebrows rose so high that they were in danger of disappearing into his hair. It's okay, you know. You can tell me the truth, he said. If you don't want everyone else to know, fine, but I don't know why you're bothering to lie. You didn't get into trouble for it, did you? That friend of the fat lady's, that Violet, she's already told us all Dumbledore's letting you enter. 1,000 galleons prize money, eh? And you don't have to do end-of-year tests, either. I didn't put my name in that goblet, said Harry, starting to feel angry. Yeah, okay, said Ron, in exactly the same skeptical tone as Cedric. Only you said this morning you'd have done it last night, and no one would have seen you. I'm not stupid, you know. You're doing a really good impression of it, Harry snapped. Yeah, said Ron. And there's no trace of a grin, forced or otherwise, on his face now. You want to get to bed, Harry? I expect you'll need to be up early tomorrow for a photo call or something. He wrenched the hanging shut around his four-poster, leaving Harry standing there by the door, staring at the dark red velvet curtains, now hiding one of the few people he had been sure would believe him. Ah! But that is the end of chapter 17. All right. And I'm going to take a 15-minute intermission, and then we're going to read chapter 18, The Weighing of the Wands. I really hope you're enjoying the stream. If you are, please click the like button and become a subscriber. If you're not subscribed already, turn on notifications so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. I will not be going live next week, but I will be going live the following week. If you'd like to know when I'll be going live, follow me on Twitter, link in the description. Also in the description is my Patreon if you'd like to support me as a content creator, or if you'd like to read my writing, because I am a writer and I have short stories and poetry and essays and the like on there, including a Harry Potter essay, analyzing the difference between the books and the films. I also have fan fiction on there, which is free. There's free stuff on there, so enjoy that stuff. Link in the description. Also in the description is my Instagram and my Patreon. My Instagram and my TikTok. My Patreon's there too, but my Instagram and my TikTok. And I will be right back. Welcome back. And now we will continue with chapter 18, The Weighing of the Wands. When Harry woke up on Sunday morning, it took him a moment to remember why he felt so miserable and worried. Then the memory of the previous night rolled over him. He sat up and ripped back the curtains of his own four-poster, intending to talk to Ron, to force Ron to believe him, only to find that Ron's bed was empty. He had obviously gone down to breakfast. Harry dressed and went down the spiral staircase into the common room. The moment he appeared, the people who had already finished breakfast broke into applause again. The prospect of going down into the great hall and facing the rest of the Gryffindors, all treating him like some sort of hero, was not inviting. It was that, however, or stay here and allow himself to be cornered by the Creevey brothers, who were both beckoning frantically to him to join them. He walked resolutely over to the portrait hole, pushed it open, climbed out of it, and found himself face to face with Hermione. "Hello," she said, holding up a stack of toast, which she was carrying in a napkin. "I brought this for you. I brought you this. Want to go for a walk?" "Good idea," said Harry gratefully. They went downstairs, crossed the entrance hall quickly without looking in at the great hall, and were soon striding across the lawn toward the lake, where the Durmstrang ship was moored, reflecting blackly in the water. It was a chilly morning, and they kept moving, munching their toast, as Harry told Hermione exactly what had happened after he had left the Gryffindor table the night before. To his immense relief, Hermione accepted his story without question. "Well, of course I knew you hadn't entered yourself," she said when he'd finished telling her about the scene in the chamber off the hall. "The look on your face when Dumbledore read out your name. But the question is, who did put it in? Because Moody's right, Harry. I don't think any student could have done it. They'd never be able to fool the goblet, or get over Dumbledore's—" "Have you seen Ron?" Harry interrupted. Hermione hesitated. Yes, he was at breakfast," she said. "Does he still think I entered myself?" "Well, no, I don't think so. Not really," said Hermione awkwardly. "What's that supposed to mean, not really?" "Oh, Harry, isn't it obvious?" Hermione said despairingly. "He's jealous." "Jealous?" Harry said incredulously. "Jealous of what? He wants to make a prat of himself in front of the whole school, does he?" "Look," said Hermione patiently, "it's always you who gets all the attention. You know it is. I know it's not your fault," she added quickly, seeing Harry open his mouth furiously. "I know you don't ask for it. But, well, you know, Ron's got all those brothers to compete against at home, and you're his best friend, and you're really famous. He's always shunted to one side whenever people see you, and he puts up with it, and he never mentions it. But I suppose this is just one time too many." It's a real It's another side of Ron's character. He's really like being fleshed out, becoming more of a dynamic character. Great, said Harry bitterly. Really great. Tell him from me I'll swap anytime he wants. Tell him from me he's welcome to it. People gawping at my forehead everywhere I go. I'm not telling him anything, Hermione said shortly. Tell him yourself is the only way to sort this out. I'm not running around after him trying to make him grow up, Harry said so loudly that several owls in a nearby tree took flight in alarm. Maybe he'll believe I'm not enjoying myself once I've got my neck broken. Oh, that's not funny, said Hermione quietly. That's not funny at all. She looked extremely anxious. Harry, I've been thinking. You know what you've got to do, don't you? Straight away, the moment we get back to the castle. Yeah, give Ron a good kick up the right to Sirius. You've got to tell him what's happened. He asked you to keep him posted on everything that's going on at Hogwarts. It's almost as if he expected something like this to happen. I brought some parchment and a quill out with me. Come off it, said Harry, looking around to check that they couldn't be overheard, but the grounds were quite deserted. He came back to the country just because my scar twinged. He'll probably come bursting right into the castle when I tell him someone's entered me into the Triwizard Tournament. He'd want you to tell him, said Hermione sternly. He's going to find out anyway. How? Harry, this isn't going to be kept quiet, said Hermione very seriously. This tournament's famous, and you're famous. I'll be really surprised if there isn't anything in the Daily Prophet about you competing. You're already in half the books about you-know-who-you-know. If Sirius would rather hear it from you, I know he would. Okay, I'll write to him, said Harry, throwing his last piece of toast into the lake. They both stood and watched it floating there for a moment, before a large tentacle rose out of the water and scooped it beneath the surface. Then they returned to the castle. Whose owl am I going to use? Harry said as they climbed the stairs. He told me not to use Hedwig again. Ask Ron if you can borrow. I'm not asking Ron for anything, Harry said flatly. Well, borrow one of the school owls then. Anyone can use them, said Hermione. They went up to the owlery. Hermione gave Harry a piece of parchment and a quill and a bottle of ink, then strolled around the long lines of perches looking at all the different owls, while Harry sat down against a wall and wrote his letter. Dear Sirius, you told me to keep you posted on what's happening at Hogwarts, so here goes. I don't know if you've heard, but the Triwizard Tournament's happening this year, and on Saturday night I got picked as a 4th champion. I don't know who put my name in the Goblet of Fire, because I didn't. The other Hogwarts champion is Cedric Diggory from Hufflepuff. He paused at this point, thinking he had an urge to I'm reading too fast. I'm not reading correctly. He paused at this point, thinking he had an urge to say something about the large weight of anxiety that seemed to have settled inside his chest since last night, but he couldn't think how to translate this into words, so he simply dipped his quill back into the ink bottle and wrote, Hope you're okay, and Buckbeak. Harry. Oh, poor thing. I'm a writer. I will help you. I will help you translate your feelings into words. It's what I do. Finished, he told Hermione, getting to his feet and brushing straw off his robes. At this, Hedwig came fluttering down onto his shoulder and held out her leg. I can't use you, Harry told her, looking around for the school owls. I've got to use one of these. Hedwig gave a very loud hoot and took off so suddenly that her talons cut into his shoulder. She kept her back to Harry all the time She kept her back to Harry all the time he was tying his letter to the leg of a large barn owl. When the barn owl had flown off, Harry reached out to stroke Hedwig, but she clicked her beak furiously and soared up into the rafters out of reach. First Ron, then you, said Harry angrily. This isn't my fault. If Harry had thought that matters would improve once everyone got used to the idea of him being champion, the following day showed him how mistaken he was. He could no longer avoid the rest of the school once he was back at lessons, and it was clear that the rest of the school, just like the Gryffindors, thought Harry had entered himself for the tournament. Unlike the Gryffindors, however, they did not seem impressed. The Hufflepuffs, who were usually on excellent terms with the Gryffindors, had turned remarkably cold toward the whole lot of them. One herbology lesson was enough to demonstrate this. It was plain that the Hufflepuffs felt that Harry had stolen their champion's glory, a feeling exacerbated, perhaps, by the fact that Hufflepuff House very rarely got any glory, and that Cedric was one of the few who had ever given them any, having beaten Gryffindor once at Quidditch. Yeah, see? Yeah, this is why Hufflepuff has the reputation that they do. Having beaten Gryffindor once at Quidditch. Ernie Macmillan and Justin Finch-Fletchley, with whom Harry normally got on very well, did not talk to him even though they were repotting Bouncing Bulbs. Bouncing Bulb. Oh, that's in the Harry Potter PlayStation games. A bouncing bulb. That's the way the herbology professor says it in the game. At the same tray, though they did laugh rather unpleasantly when one of the bouncing bulbs wriggled free from Harry's grip and smacked him hard in the face. Ron wasn't talking to Harry either. Hermione sat between them, making very forced conversation, but though both answered her normally, they avoided making eye contact with each other. Harry thought even Professor Sprout seemed distant with him. But then she was head of Hufflepuff House. He would have been looking forward to seeing Hagrid under normal circumstances, but care of magical creatures meant seeing the Slytherins too. The first time he would come face to face with them seemed since becoming champion. Predictably, Malfoy arrived at Hagrid's cabin with his familiar sneer firmly in place. "And look, boys, it's the champion," he said to Crabbe and Goyle the moment he got within earshot of Harry. "Got your autograph books? Better get a signature now, because I doubt he's going to be around much longer. Half the Triwizard champions have died. How long do you reckon you're going to last, Potter? 10 minutes into the first task's my bet." Crabbe and Goyle guffawed sycophantically. I think that means together. But Malfoy had to stop there, because Hagrid emerged from the back of his cabin, balancing a teetering tower of crates, each containing a very large blast-ended Scroot. To the class's horror, Hagrid proceeded to explain that the reason the Scroots had been killing one another was an excess of pent-up energy, and that the solution would be for each student to fix a leash to a Scroot and take it for a short walk. That sounds like a terrible idea. The only good thing about this plan was that it distracted Malfoy completely. "Take this thing for a walk?" he repeated in disgust, staring into one of the boxes. "And where exactly are we supposed to fix the leash? Around the sting, the blasting end, or the sucker?" "Around the middle," said Hagrid, demonstrating. You might want to put on your dragonhide gloves, just as an extra precaution, like. Harry, you come here and help me with this big one." Hagrid's real intention, however, was to talk to Harry away from the rest of the class. He waited until everyone else had set off with their Scroots, then turned to Harry and said very seriously, "So, you're competing, Harry, in the tournament. School champion. One of the champions." Harry corrected him. Hagrid's beetle-black eyes looked very anxious under his wild eyebrows. "No idea what put you in for it, Harry." "You believe I didn't do it, then?" said Harry, concealing with difficulty the rush of gratitude he felt at Hagrid's words. "Course I don't." "Course I do," Hagrid grunted. "You say it wasn't you, and I believe you. And Dumbledore believes you and all. I wish I knew who did do it," said Harry bitterly. The pair of them looked out over the lawn. The class was widely scattered now, and all in great difficulty. The Scroots were now over 3 feet long and extremely powerful. No longer shellless and colorless, they had developed a kind of thick, grayish, shiny armor. They looked like a cross between giant scorpions and elongated crabs, but still without recognizable heads or eyes. They had become immensely strong and very hard to control. "Look like they're having fun, don't they?" Hagrid said happily. Harry assumed he was talking about the Scroots, because his classmates certainly weren't. Every now and then, with an alarming bang, one of the Scroots' ends would explode, causing it to shoot forward several yards, and more than one person was being dragged along on their stomach, trying desperately to get back on their feet. I don't know, Harry. Hagrid sighed suddenly, looking back down at him with a worried expression on his face. School champion. Everything seems to happen to you, doesn't it? Harry didn't answer. Yes, everything did seem to happen to him. It was more or less what Hermione had said as they had walked around the lake, and that was the reason, according to her, that Ron was no longer talking to him. The next few days were some of Harry's worst at Hogwarts. Oh, honey, it's gonna get worse. I hate to say this. I hate to break it to you. The closest he had ever come to feeling like this had been during those months, in his second year, when a large part of the school had suspected him of attacking his fellow students. Yeah, I remember. That's Chamber of Secrets. But Ron had been on his side then. He thought he could have coped with the rest of the school's behavior if he could just have had Ron back as a friend. But he wasn't going to try and persuade Ron to talk to him if Ron didn't want to. Nevertheless, it was lonely with dislike pouring in on him from all sides. He could understand the Hufflepuff's attitude, even if he didn't like it. They had their own champion to support. He expected nothing less than vicious insults from the Slytherins. He was highly unpopular there, and always had been, because he had helped Gryffindor beat them so often, both at Quidditch and in the Inter-House Championship. But he had hoped the Ravenclaws might have found it in their hearts to support him as much as Cedric. He was wrong, however. Most Ravenclaws seemed to think that he had been desperate to earn himself a bit more fame by tricking the goblet into accepting his name. Then there was the fact that Cedric looked the part of a champion so much more than he did. Exceptionally handsome, with his straight nose, dark hair, and gray eyes, it was hard to say who was receiving more admiration these days, Cedric or Victor Crumb. Harry actually saw the same sixth-year girls who had been so keen to get Crumb's autograph, begging Cedric to sign their school bags on one lunchtime. Meanwhile, there was no reply from Sirius. Hedwig was refusing to come anywhere near him. Professor Trelawney was predicting his death with even more certainty than usual, and he did so badly at summoning charms in Professor Flitwick's class that he was given extra homework, the only person to get any, apart from Neville. Jeez. It's really not that difficult, Harry, Hermione tried to reassure him as they left Flitwick's class. She had been making objects zoom across the room to her all lesson, as though she were some sort of weird magnet for board dusters, waste paper baskets, and lunoscopes. You just weren't concentrating properly. Wonder why that was, said Harry darkly as Cedric Diggory walked past, surrounded by a large group of simpering girls, all of whom looked at Harry as though he were a particularly large blast-ended Scroot. Still, never mind, eh? Double potions to look forward to this afternoon. Double potions was always a horrible experience, but these days it was nothing short of torture. Being shut in a dungeon for an hour and a half with Snape and the Slytherins, all of whom seemed determined to punish Harry as much as possible for daring to become school champion, was about the most unpleasant thing Harry could imagine. He had already struggled through one Friday's worth, with Hermione sitting next to him, intoning, "Ignore them, ignore them, ignore them," under her breath, and he couldn't see why today should be any better. When he and Hermione arrived at Snape's dungeon after lunch, they found the Slytherins waiting outside, each and every one of them wearing a large badge on the front of his or her robes. For one wild moment Harry thought they were SPEW badges. Then he saw that they all bore the same message in luminous red letters that burnt brightly in the dimly lit underground passage. Support Cedric Diggory, the real Hogwarts champion. "Like him, Potter?" said Malfoy loudly as Harry approached. "And this isn't all they do. Look." He pressed his badge into his chest, and the message upon it vanished, to be replaced by another one, which glowed green. Potter Stakes. The Slytherins howled with laughter. Each of them pressed their badges too, until the message Potter Stinks was shining brightly all around Harry. He felt the heat rise in his face and neck. "Oh, very funny," Hermione said sarcastically to Pansy Parkinson and her gang of Slytherin girls, who were laughing harder than anyone. "Really witty." Ron was standing against the wall with Dean and Seamus. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't sticking up for Harry either. "Want one, Granger?" said Malfoy, holding out a badge to Hermione. "I've got loads. But don't touch my hand now. I've just washed it, you see. Don't want a mudblood sliming it up." Some of the anger Harry had been feeling for days and days seemed to burst through a dam in his chest. He had reached for his wand before he'd thought what he was doing. People all around them scrambled out of the way, backing down the corridor. "Harry!" Hermione said warningly. "Go on then, Potter," Malfoy said quietly, drawing out his own wand. "Moody's not here to look after you now. Do it, if you've got the guts." For a split second they looked into each other's eyes. Then, at exactly the same time, both acted. "Ranunculus!" Harry yelled. "Densagio? Densagio!" screamed Malfoy. Jets of light shot from both wands, hit each other in midair, and ricocheted off at angles. Harry's hit Goyle in the face, and Malfoy's hit Hermione. Goyle bellowed and put his hands to his nose, where great ugly boils were springing up. Hermione, whimpering in panic, was clutching her mouth. "Hermione!" I think it's interesting how they've escalated. Just how, like, when they were kids, like, they didn't shoot spells at each other, but now that they're, like, 14, just still a kid, but an older kid, now they're actually, like, shooting spells at each other. Things are becoming more volatile. Because as they're going through puberty, you can definitely see emotions are running higher than usual. And I just can't wait for the next one. I'm so excited for Order of the Phoenix when Malfoy really gets what's coming to him. I'm excited. Anyway. Ron had hurried forward to see what was wrong with her. Harry turned and saw Ron dragging Hermione's hand away from her face. It wasn't a pretty sight. Hermione's front teeth, already larger than average, were now growing at an alarming rate. She was looking more and more like a beaver as her teeth elongated, past her bottom lip, toward her chin. Panic-stricken, she felt them, and let out a terrified cry. Oh! Oh! I knew there was something I was regretting. Dreading, rather. "And what is all this noise about?" said a soft, deadly voice. Snape had arrived. The Slytherins clamored to give their explanations. Snape pointed a long yellow finger at Malfoy and said, "Explain." "Potter attacked me, sir. We attacked each other at the same time," Harry shouted. "And he hit Goyle. Look." Snape examined Goyle, whose face was now resembled something that would have been at home in a book on poisonous fungi. "Hospital wing, Goyle," Snape said calmly. "Malfoy got Hermione," Ron said. "Look." He forced Hermione to show Snape her teeth. She was doing her best to hide them with her hands, though it was difficult as they had now grown down past her collar. Pansy Parkinson and the other Slytherin girls were doubled up with silent giggles, pointing at Hermione from behind Snape's back. Oh. Snape looked coldly at Hermione, then said, "I see no difference." I want to strangle that man. Hermione let out a whimper. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned on her heel and ran all the way up the corridor and out of sight. It was lucky, perhaps, that both Harry and Ron started shouting at Snape at the same time. Lucky their voices echoed so much in the stone corridor, for in the confused din it was impossible for him to hear exactly what they were calling him. He got the gist. Teenagers. Also, notice how, like, each of the main characters kind of get the book where they are the most emotionally fraught. I mean, they all have their moments in each one, I think, but you can kind of see the progression. Like, the last book, Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione had a really tough time. You know, she and Ron were fighting about her cat, and she had the time turner and all that extra schoolwork she was doing, and she punched Malfoy. Okay, she didn't punch him, she slapped him. In the movie, she punched him. And you could tell that she's going through some things, right? And so I think Hermione had her difficult pubescent year in the last book. Not to say that she doesn't have moments here and there later on, this moment in particular, but last year seemed to be the big one, right? Well, this book, it's Ron. Ron's really going through it, with him and Harry fighting, and Ron at the Yule Ball, and, all that stuff. The next book is going to be Harry, though. And it's pretty much the whole book, with him being very angry for half the book, and then... for the first half, he's angry. First half. For the first third of the book, he's, super angry. The second third of the book, he's, infatuated. And then the third part of the book, he's miserable. You'll see. But anyway, but you can see that each character kind of gets their own coming-of-age book. Let's see, he said in his silkiest voice. 50 points from Gryffindor, and a detention each for Potter and Weasley. Now get inside, or it'll be a week's worth of detentions. Harry's ears were ringing. The injustice of it made him want to curse Snape into 1,000 slimy pieces. He passed Snape, walked with Ron to the back of the dungeon, and slammed his bag down onto the table. Ron was shaking with anger, too. For a moment it felt as though everything was back to normal between them. But then Ron turned and sat down with Dean and Seamus instead, leaving Harry alone at his table. On the other side of the dungeon, Malfoy turned his back on Snape and pressed his badge, smirking. Potter stinks flashed once more across the room. Harry sat there staring at Snape as the lesson began, picturing horrific things happening to him. If only he knew how to do the Cruciatus Curse. He'd have Snape flat on his back like that spider, jerking and twitching. That shouldn't be funny. It should be disturbing that Harry's having these dark thoughts, but I totally understand it. Antidotes, said Snape, looking around at them all, his cold black eyes glittering unpleasantly. You should all have prepared your recipes now. I want you to brew them carefully, and then we will be selecting someone on whom to test one. Snape's eyes met Harry's, and Harry knew what was coming. Snape was going to poison him. Harry imagined picking up his cauldron and sprinting in the front of the class and bringing it down on Snape's greasy head. And then a knock on the dungeon door. Oh, yeah! The whole point of the chapter, I forgot. And then a knock on the dungeon door burst in on Harry's thoughts. It was Colin Creevey. He edged into the room, beaming at Harry, and walked up to Snape's desk at the front of the room. Yes, said Snape curtly. Please, sir, I'm supposed to take Harry Potter upstairs. Snape stared down his hooked nose at Colin, whose smile faded from his eager face. Potter has another hour of potions to complete, said Snape coldly. He will come upstairs when this class is finished. Colin went pink. Sir, Mr. Bagman wants him, he said nervously. All the champions have got to go. I think they want to take photographs. Harry would have given anything he owned to have stopped Colin saying those last few words. He chanced half a glance at Ron, but Ron was staring determinedly at the ceiling. Very well, Snape snapped. Potter, leave your things here. I want you back down here later to test your antidote. Please, sir, he's got to take his things with him, squeaked Colin. All the champions? Very well, said Snape. Potter, take your bag and get out of my sight. Spoiled Snape's fun. Harry swung his bag over his shoulder, got up, and headed for the door. As he walked through the Slytherin desks, Potter stinks flashed at him from every direction. It's amazing, isn't it, Harry? Said Colin, starting to speak the moment Harry had closed the dungeon door behind him. Isn't it, though? You being champion? Yeah, really amazing, said Harry heavily as they set off toward the steps into the entrance hall. What do they want photos for, Colin? The Daily Prophet, I think. Great, said Harry dully. Exactly what I need. More publicity. Good luck, said Colin, when they had reached the right room. Harry knocked on the door and entered. He was in a fairly small classroom. Most of the desks had been pushed away to the back of the room, leaving a large space in the middle. 3 of them, however, had been placed end to end in front of the blackboard and covered with a long length of velvet. The 5 chairs had been set behind the velvet-covered desks, and little Bagman was sitting in one of them, talking to a witch Harry had never seen before, who was wearing magenta robes. Excuse me. It's been a while since I brought this out. Victor Crumb was standing moodily in a corner as usual and not talking to anybody. Cedric and Fleur were in conversation. Fleur looked a good deal happier than Harry had seen her so far. She kept throwing back her head so that her long silvery hair caught the light. A paunchy man, holding a large black camera that was smoking slightly, was watching Fleur out of the corner of his eye. Bagman suddenly spotted Harry, got up quickly, and bounded forward. "Ah, here he is, champion number 4. In you come, Harry, in you come. Nothing to worry about, it's just the wand-weighing ceremony. The rest of the judges will be here in a moment." "Wand-weighing?" Harry repeated nervously. "We have to check that your wands are fully functional. No problems, you know, as they're your most important tools in the tasks ahead," said Bagman. "The expert's upstairs now with Dumbledore, and then there's going to be a little photo shoot. This is Rita Skeeter," he added, gesturing toward the witch in magenta robes. "She's doing a small piece on the tournament for the Daily Prophet." "Maybe not that small, Ludo," said Rita Skeeter, her eyes on Harry. Her hair was set in elaborate and curiously rigid curls that contrasted oddly with her heavy-jawed face. She wore jeweled spectacles. The thick fingers clutching her crocodile skin handbag ended in 2-inch nails, painted crimson. "I wonder if I could have a little word with Harry before we start," she said to Bagman, but still gazing fixedly at Harry. "The youngest champion now. To add a bit of colour." Ooh. That's some strong wind going on. "Certainly," cried Bagman. "That is, if Harry has no objection." Said Harry. "Lovely," said Rita Skeeter, and in a second her scarlet-taloned fingers had Harry's upper arm in a surprisingly strong grip, and she was steering him out of the room again and opening a nearby door. "We don't want to be in there with all that noise," she said. "Let's see. Ah, yes, this is nice and cozy." It was a broom cupboard. Harry stared at her. "Come along, dear. That's right. Lovely," said Rita Skeeter again, perching herself precariously upon an upturned bucket, pushing Harry down onto a cardboard box and closing the door, throwing them into darkness. "Let's see now." She unsnapped her crocodile skin handbag and pulled out a handful of candles, which she lit with a wave of her wand and magicked into thin mid-air so that they could see what they were doing. "You won't mind, Harry, if I use a quick quotes quill. It leaves me free to talk to you normally." "A what?" said Harry. Rita Skeeter's smile widened. Harry counted 3 gold teeth. She reached again into her crocodile bag and drew out a long acid-green quill and a roll of parchment, which she stretched out between them on a crate of Mrs. Scour's all-purpose magical mess remover. She put the tip of the green quill into her mouth, sucked it for a moment with apparent relish, then placed it upward on the parchment, where it stood balanced on its point, quivering slightly. "Testing? My name is Rita Skeeter, Daily Prophet reporter." Harry looked down quickly at the quill. The moment Rita Skeeter had spoken, the green quill had started to scribble, skidding across the parchment. "Attractive blonde Rita Skeeter, 43, whose savage quill has punctured many inflated reputations." "Lovely," said Rita Skeeter, yet again, and she ripped the top piece of the parchment off, crumpled it up, and stuffed it into her handbag. Now she leaned toward Harry and said, "So, Harry, what made you decide to enter the Triwizard Tournament?" Said Harry again. But he was distracted by the quill. Even though he wasn't speaking, it was dashing across the parchment, and in its wake he could make out a fresh sentence. An ugly scar, souvenir of a tragic past, disfigures the otherwise charming face of Harry Potter, whose eyes— Ignore the quill, Harry, said Rita Skeeter firmly. Reluctantly, Harry looked up at her instead. Now, why did you decide to enter the tournament, Harry? I didn't, said Harry. I don't know how my name got into the Goblet of Fire. I didn't put it in there. Rita Skeeter raised one heavily penciled eyebrow. Come now, Harry. There's no need to be scared of getting into trouble. We all know you shouldn't really have entered at all. But don't worry about that. Our readers love a rebel. But I didn't enter, Harry repeated. I don't know who— How do you feel about the tasks ahead? Said Rita Skeeter. Excited? Nervous? I haven't really thought— Yeah, nervous, I suppose, said Harry. His insides squirmed uncomfortably as he spoke. Champions have died in the past, haven't they? Said Rita Skeeter briskly. Have you thought about that at all? Well, they say it's going to be a lot safer this year, said Harry. The quill whizzed across the parchment between them, back and forward, as though it were skating. Of course, you've looked dead in the face before, haven't you? Said Rita Skeeter, watching him closely. How would you say that's affected you? Said Harry yet again. Do you think that the trauma in your past might have made you keen to prove yourself, to live up to your name? Do you think that perhaps you were tempted to enter the Triwizard Tournament because— I didn't enter, said Harry, starting to feel irritated. Can you remember your parents at all? Said Rita Skeeter, talking over him. No, said Harry. How do you think they'd feel if they knew you were competing in the Triwizard Tournament? Proud? Worried? Angry? Harry was feeling really annoyed now. How on earth was he to know how his parents would feel if they were alive? He could feel Rita Skeeter watching him very intently. Frowning, he avoided her gaze and looked down at the words the quill had just written. Tears filled with those startling green eyes as our conversation turns to the parents he can barely remember. I have not got tears in my eyes, said Harry loudly. Before Rita Skeeter could say a word, the door of the broom cupboard was pulled open. Harry looked around, blinking in the bright light. Albus Dumbledore stood there, looking down at both of them, squashed into the cupboard. Dumbledore! Cried Rita Skeeter, with every appearance of delight, but Harry noticed that her quill on the parchment had suddenly vanished from the box of magical mess remover, and Rita's clawed fingers were hastily snapping shut the clasp of her crocodile skin bag. How are you? She said, standing up and holding out one of her large, mannish hands to Dumbledore. I hope you saw my piece over the summer about the International Confederation of Wizards Conference. Enchantingly nasty, said Dumbledore, his eyes twinkling. I particularly enjoyed your description of me as an absolute dingbat. Rita Skeeter didn't look remotely abashed. I was just making the point that some of your ideas are a little old-fashioned, Dumbledore, and that many wizards in the street— I will be delighted to hear the reasoning behind the rudeness, Rita, said Dumbledore with a courteous bow and a smile, but I'm afraid we will have to discuss the matter later. The weighing of the wands is about to start, and it cannot take place if one of our champions is hidden in a broom cupboard. Very glad to get away from Rita Skeeter, Harry hurried back into the room. The other champions were now sitting in chairs near the door, and he sat down quickly next to Cedric, looking up at the velvet-covered table, where 4 of the 5 judges were now sitting: Professor Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, Mr. Crouch, and Ludo Bagman. Rita Skeeter settled herself down in a corner. Harry saw her slip the parchment out of her bag again and spread it on her knee, stuck the end of the Quick Quotes quill, and place it once more upon the parchment. Place it once more on the parchment. May I introduce Mr. Ollivander, said Dumbledore, taking his place at the judges' table and talking to the champions. He will be checking your wands to ensure that they are in good condition before the tournament. Okay, so, this one? That's not bad. You can't see me, but that's okay. So here is my Harry Potter pyramid. Now, if you are brand new, you've never heard me talk about this before, but if you're not, you've heard me talk about this several times. So, what you'll notice about each Harry Potter book is that it has similarities that directly correspond with other books, as you can see on the pyramid here. So we have each of the books, and it forms a pyramid. We have Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone / Sorcerer's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, and Deathly Hallows. You'll notice similarities between Chamber of Secrets and Half-Blood Prince. You'll notice similarities between Prisoner of Azkaban and Order of the Phoenix. And when I have read, or when I will read those books, you'll see the different. I'll point out the similarities to you. But right now we're on Goblet of Fire, and so the similarities are between Sorcerer's Stone, Goblet of Fire, and Deathly Hallows. And this moment is one of them. Ollivander, of course, is mentioned one way or another, probably in all the books, but he's most prominently mentioned, and we even meet him in only these 3. And so he's a key character in only these 3 books, and that's why that's one of the similarities between them. So let's see what Mr. Ollivander has for us. Harry looked around, and with a jolt of surprise saw an old wizard with large, pale eyes standing quietly by the window. Harry had met Mr. Ollivander before. He was the wand maker from whom Harry had bought his wand over 3 years ago in Diagon Alley. Mademoiselle Delacour, could we have you first, please? Said Mr. Ollivander, stepping into the empty space in the middle of the room. Flora Delacour swept over to Mr. Ollivander and handed him her wand. He said. He twirled the wand between his long fingers like a baton, and it emitted a number of pink and gold sparks. Then he held it close to his eyes and examined it carefully. Yes, he said quietly, 9.5 inches, inflexible, rosewood, and containing, dear me, an heir from the end of a villa, said Fleur, one of my grandmothers. So Fleur was part villa, thought Harry, making a mental note to tell Ron. Then he remembered that Ron wasn't speaking to him. Yes, said Mr. Ollivander. Yes, I've never used villa hair myself, of course. I find it makes for rather temperamental ones. However, to each his own, and if this suits you. Mr. Ollivander ran his fingers along the wand, apparently checking for scratches or bumps. Then he muttered, Orchideus, and a bunch of flowers burst from the wand tip. That's from the Harry Potter games as well. Orchideus. Very well. It's in fine working order, said Mr. Ollivander, scooping up the flowers and handing them to Fleur with her wand. Mr. Diggory, you next. Fleur glided back to her seat, smiling at Cedric as he passed her. Ah, now, this is one of mine, isn't it? Said Mr. Ollivander, with much more enthusiasm, as Cedric handed over his wand. Yes, I remember it well. Containing a single hair from the tail of a particularly fine male unicorn. Must have been 17 hands, nearly gored me with his horn after I plucked his tail. 12.25 inches, ash, pleasantly springy. It's in fine condition. You treat it regularly. That's such an odd thing to say. I polished it last night. Said Cedric, grinning. That's hilarious. That's funny. It's funny for adult reasons. Harry looked down at his own wand. He could see finger marks all over it. He gathered a fistful of robes from his knee and tried to rub it clean surreptitiously. Several gold sparks shot out of the end of it. Fleur Delacour gave him a very patronizing look, and he desisted. Mr. Ollivander sent a stream of silver smoke rings across the room from the tip of Cedric's wand, pronounced himself satisfied, and then said, Mr. Crumb, if you please. Victor Crumb got up and slouched, round-shouldered and duck-footed toward Mr. Ollivander. He thrust out his wand and stood scowling, with his hands in the pockets of his robes. Said Mr. Ollivander. This is a Gogorovitch creation, unless I'm much mistaken. A fine wand maker, though the styling is never quite what I... However... It's Gogorovitch! Very important! He lifted the wand and examined it minutely, turning it over and over before his eyes. Yes, hornbeam and dragon heartstring. He shot at Crumb, who nodded. Rather thicker than one usually sees. Quite rigid. 10 1/4 inches. Avis. The hornbeam wand let off a blast like a gun, and a number of small twittering birds flew out of the end and through the open window into the watery sunlight. Good, said Mr. Ollivander, handing Crumb back his wand. Which leaves Mr. Potter. Harry got to his feet and walked past Crumb to Mr. Ollivander. He handed over his wand. Ah, yes, said Mr. Ollivander, his pale eyes suddenly gleaming. Yes, yes, yes. How well I remember. Man. It was a long time ago since we read that book, right? Harry could remember, too. He could remember as though it had happened yesterday. 4 summers ago, on his 11th birthday, he had entered Mr. Ollivander's shop with Hagrid to buy a wand. Mr. Ollivander had taken his measurements and then started handing him wands to try. Harry had waved what felt like every wand in the shop until at last he had found the one that suited him. This one, which was made of holly, 11 inches long, and contained a single feather from the tail of a phoenix. Mr. Ollivander had been very surprised that Harry had been so compatible with this wand. Curious, he had said. Curious. And not until Harry asked what was curious had Mr. Ollivander explained that the phoenix feather in Harry's wand had come from the same bird that had supplied the core of Lord Voldemort's. Harry had never shared this piece of information with anybody. He was very fond of his wand, and as far as he was concerned, it related to Voldemort's wand was... Its relation to Voldemort's wand was something it couldn't help, rather as he couldn't help being related to Aunt Petunia. However, he really hoped that Mr. Ollivander wasn't about to tell the room about it. He had a funny feeling Rita Skeeter's quick-quotes quill might just explode with excitement if he did. Mr. Ollivander spent much longer examining Harry's wand than anyone else's. Eventually, however, he made a fountain of wine shoot out of it and handed it back to Harry, announcing that it was still in perfect condition. Thank you all, said Dumbledore, standing up at the judge's table. You may go back to your lessons now. Or perhaps it would be quicker just to go down to dinner, as they are about to end. Feeling that at last something had gone right today, Harry got up to leave, but the man with the black camera jumped up and cleared his throat. Photos, Dumbledore, photos. Oh, I didn't realize he was talking. Photos, Dumbledore, photos, cried Bagman excitedly. All the judges and champions. What do you think, Rita? Yes, let's do those first, said Rita Skeeter, whose eyes were upon Harry again, and then perhaps some individual shots. The photographs took a long time. Madame Maxime cast everyone else into shadow wherever she stood, and the photographer couldn't stand far enough back to get her into frame. Eventually she had to sit while everyone else stood around her. Karkaroff kept twirling his goatee around his finger to give it an extra curl. Crumb, whom Harry would have thought would have been used to this sort of thing, skulked half-hidden at the back of the group. The photographer seemed keenest to get Fleur at the front, but Rita Skeeter kept hurrying forward and dragging Harry into greater prominence. Then she insisted on separate shots of all the champions. At last they were free to go. Harry went down to dinner. Hermione wasn't there. He supposed she was still in the hospital wing. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. That feels like forever ago. He supposed she was still in the hospital wing having her teeth fixed. He ate alone at the end of the table, then returned to Gryffindor Tower, thinking of all the extra work on summoning charms that he had to do. Trust me, Harry, you want this spell. This spell you want down. Up in the dormitory, he came across Ron. You've had an owl, said Ron brusquely, the moment he walked in. He was pointing at Harry's pillow. The school barn owl was waiting for him there. Oh, right, said Harry. And we've got to do our detentions tomorrow night, Snape's dungeon, said Ron. He then walked straight out of the room, not looking at Harry. For a moment Harry considered going after him. He wasn't sure whether he wanted to talk to him or hit him. Both seemed quite appealing. But the lure of Sirius's answer was too strong. Harry strode over to the barn owl, took the letter off its leg, and unrolled it. Harry, I can't say everything I would like to in a letter. It's too risky, in case the owl is intercepted. We need to talk face to face. Can you ensure that you are alone by the fire in Gryffindor Tower at 1 o'clock in the morning on the 22nd of November? Oh, I thought today was the 22nd. That was really weird. The 22nd's in a few days. I know better than anyone that you can look after yourself, and while you're around Dumbledore and Moody, I don't think anyone will be able to hurt you. However, someone seems to be having a good try. Entering you into that tournament would have been very risky, especially right under Dumbledore's nose. Be on the watch, Harry. I still want to hear about anything unusual. Let me know about the 22nd of November as quickly as you can. Sirius. All right, and that is the end of chapter 18. And then, not next week, but the week after next, we're reading chapter 19, The Hungarian Horntail, and then chapter 20, which I believe is the first task. The first task. How exciting. And we will officially be halfway. We might even be halfway right now. We're a hair under halfway. And then we'll be halfway through the series as a whole. Crazy. I can't believe that we're just chugging through this. It's pretty exciting. All right. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please tell me what you thought of the stream in the comment section down below. Click the like button. And if you enjoy this content, become a subscriber by clicking the subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. I will not be going live next week, but I will be going live the week after. If you'd like to know when, follow me on Twitter, link in the description. Also in the description is my Patreon if you'd like to support me as a content creator. And I'm also a writer, and you can read my writing there as well. And there's free stuff if you can't afford to become a patron, is there for you to enjoy. And I also have a TikTok and an Instagram link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a magical evening. Bye-bye!